Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. U.S. Congress to hear of the challenges of correspondence banking of CARICOM states. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Friday, 22nd April 2022. Details when we return.
Hubbard's Motor Department Mount Gay and Hubbard's Tire Bay, located at the Building Supplies Compound in Grand Anse, are reminding the motoring public that another round for licensing and inspection has begun. Just arrived on new shipments of quality furrowed and torque tires to fit all makes and models of vehicles at competitive pricing. Shop early to avoid the hassle of long lines. WhatsApp them on 473-405-5482. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
Welcome back. At a meeting between CARICOM leaders and members of the Financial Services Committee of the U.S. Congress in Barbuda, it was agreed that the U.S. will host congressional hearings before year-end on CARICOM's challenges in correspondence banking. More in this comprehensive report from Barbuda today.
That's among the major outcomes of an intense round of talks involving CARICOM leaders and members of the Financial Services Committee of the U.S. Congress here today. The talks were jointly chaired by Prime Minister Mia Mottley and the United States Congresswoman Maxine Waters, the chairwoman of the U.S. House Committee on Financial Services at the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Center. At a press conference this evening, Mottley said, having heard the region's concern, the U.S. delegation agreed the issues should be presented to Congress.
The U.S. congressional delegation has agreed that this issue is of such major import that it really now merits congressional hearings to allow us to bring not only those who are here in Barbuda today, but to expose this issue to a wider audience and also to bring those other banks who may well be benefiting from our business, but who are not willing to share in the burden that may be necessary in meeting additional regulatory issues as it relates to giving us the opportunity to be beneficiaries of correspondent banking relationships. The truth is that the refrain that is heard the most is that we are too small and not profitable enough for them to undertake the enhanced due diligence that may be required of them in different markets.
Mottley stressed that tackling these kinds of matters was imperative for the region's survival.
It is important that the banking sector on both sides, in the US and in the Caribbean, get to know each other, get to speak to each other, and start to deconstruct and reconstruct such that we understand what it is we're trying to achieve, why the regulatory requirements are so complex and challenging, and how we can minimize it. All of us know that the notion that you're going to ask an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old to bring a light bill to open a bank account, when years ago we would just walk into a bank and open a bank account, is today absurd. And it therefore means that too many of our citizens are remaining unbanked because of the additional burdens being placed on banks in order to be able to meet the demands and to ensure that they themselves, as one put it today, we have sometimes to de-risk customers to ensure that we as banks are not de-risked.
Chair of the CARICOM Commission on the Economy, Professor Avinash Prasad, has called for urgent reform on the way countries are blacklisted. Speaking during today's opening session of the Caribbean Financial Access Roundtable, Professor Prasad said small countries in the Caribbean were being unfairly blacklisted. In fact, he said the current structure was actually encouraging money laundering as opposed to fighting it.
Countries are being listed in an arbitrary way, and they are listed when they have very limited actual international financial impact or where the money laundering is. And as the Prime Minister said, the money launderers like it so. This process is increasing money laundering. It's telling the money launderers where to go. It's telling them don't go in these small states. And the problem is that our financial inclusiveness is now going backwards for the first time. So how are we going to change that? Because us spending more money on more processes, we currently spend more as a percent of GDP on AML processes than any of the countries which are the centers of money laundering. We're spending more money as a percent of GDP and getting listed. We're spending more money than those countries that should be listed. So should we spend even more money when we have very limited budgets, very limited balance sheets? The senior people of the government is spending its time dealing with a phantom problem when they could be dealing with a real problem of poverty and inequality and climate change.
The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, slashed its forecast for global economic growth by nearly a full percentage point, citing Russia's war in Ukraine, and warned inflation is a clear and present danger for many countries.
The IMF's projections for the world economy have worsened significantly since its last report in January, when it predicted a post-pandemic recovery. The reason is clear.
Global economic prospects have been severely set back, largely because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This crisis unfolds as the global economy has not yet fully recovered from the pandemic.
From an estimated 6.1% in 2021, the IMF now says economic growth will shrink to 3.6% in 2022 and 2023. The fund says that inflation, already surging due to the pandemic, will be amplified due to war-related supply shortages. And its World Economic Outlook says increases in food and fuel prices could lead to social unrest. However, the IMF also said inflation for advanced economies may fall to 2.5% next year. Some economists say that should mean a change in course to prevent a devastating global recession.
Threatening to do what it's done many times before, which is to increase interest rates unnecessarily. And that affects the whole world because interest rates of other central banks tend to follow the Fed in the world. And that makes it more difficult for developing countries to avoid crises, economic crises that push millions of people into poverty.
But such as the uncertainty about the war in Ukraine, further energy sanctions on Russia, future deadly COVID variants, and more supply bottlenecks in China, the IMF says its latest predictions may be too optimistic. To coincide with the IMF spring meetings, Oxfam has released a study predicting that the pandemic and the war in Ukraine could push more than 263 million people into extreme poverty in 2022.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick.
There has been more than 70% drop in drug-related matters before the criminal courts in Trinidad and Tobago since the decriminalization of marijuana in 2019. More in this TTT News item.
Acting Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi gave statistics as he led a motion to adopt the report of the Joint Select Committee on the Cannabis Control Bill 2020 in the lower house on Wednesday.
There has been a 78% drop in the average number of drug-related matters filed annually at the magistracy, from 6,600 odd to 1,400 odd. A drop in a monthly total of 551 matters to 114 matters.
Mr. Al-Rawi, who chaired the Joint Select Committee, said between 2017 to 2018, there were some 9,553 marijuana-related cases, with 8,316 being for possession of marijuana alone. The Acting Attorney General said the proposals in the Cannabis Control Bill 2020 would allow for balance as it relates to dose limitations, caregiver limitations, and strict rules for medical practitioners.
But today, we are saying to the nation, let us do like the rest of the world has. Let us carefully manage the lawful exploitation of cannabis, cultivation, production, etc., under license. Let us look after the most vulnerable, our children, etc. Let us categorize it into medicinal use and religious use.
With the world still in the throes of the COVID-19, the Ministry of Health in Trinidad and Tobago is responding to concerns raised by international researchers of a potential outbreak of a new Zika variant. The mosquito-borne virus is known to cause significant birth defects when pregnant women are infected. TV6's Ranessa Cutting has more.
With the rainy season just weeks away, the Ministry of Health is urging homeowners to ensure their properties are free from potential mosquito breeding grounds.
The measures to manage the mosquito population remain the same, tried and tested over time, whether it's Zika, whether it's chikungunya, whether it's dengue. It's a combination of personal responsibility by homeowners, keep their vases inside their homes, make sure you wash it out and clean it, don't have water contained in receptacles, cover your tanks, cover your barrels if you collect water in barrels, clean your guttering.
The ministry is also doing its part, but the minister says it can only do so much.
Because you don't want a country to be overspraying for mosquitoes. Why? We try to spray an area in a 4-month cycle. Why? You can't spray more than that because the mosquitoes will build up resistance to the chemicals. And then you create a bigger problem that you're trying to solve.
This as U.S. scientists warn of the potential for an outbreak of new Zika variants based on research on the patterns of mutations. The virus has caused thousands of children worldwide to be born with a condition called Microcephaly, a birth defect where a baby's head is significantly smaller than average. These children may also have damage to brain tissue. While the virus is primarily transmitted by the Aedes aegypti mosquito, it can also be sexually transmitted. Symptoms of Zika include rash, fever, and joint pain. There is no treatment or vaccine. Renessa Cutting, TV6 News.
Antigua and Barbuda is hosting a stakeholder workshop to assess how the response measures to climate change are impacting societies in Latin America and the Caribbean. The event is taking place at the John E. St. Luce Finance and Conference Center in Antigua. Jamie J. Roche of ABS News reports.
The stakeholders are meeting virtually and in person at Sir John E. St. Luce Finance and Conference Center for the 3-day seminar which began Wednesday. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change team and the International Labour Organization have organized the sessions for Latin American and Caribbean stakeholders. By this agreement, the region has been implementing measures to combat climate change. It is vital now to assess how these response measures have been impacting the countries environmentally, socially, and economically. This will help countries identify and implement policies that work best in their situation.
This is imperative that countries be equipped with the capacity to conduct these own assessments. Assessments have to be part of the policy planning itself.
This planning must consider that some jobs will become obsolete as part of the transition to a net zero society. At the same time, the transition will create even more jobs. The task then is to ensure there's a just workforce transition.
Just transition to ensure that where persons in particular sectors are provided the ability and capacity to transition or take advantage of the opportunities that a transition can bring.
That's why it's important for stakeholders to gather in this forum to share and develop best practices and solutions. At the end of the day, everyone may not benefit equally from a transition to net zero, but a transition is needed if the world is to combat the worst effects of climate change. Jimmy J. Roche, ABS News.
Conveniently located in the Grand Anse Shopping Center, for over 40 years, Food Fair has provided quality service at affordable prices. Now, grocery shopping is made easier and more convenient from the Food Fair web store.
Hey, babe. Listen, I need you to go down to Food Fair to get some groceries.
All right, no problem. Right away.
Thanks, babe. What are you doing? You're supposed to be going Food Fair to get a grocery, man.
I am, but didn't you know you can order your groceries online from the Food Fair web store?
Are you serious?
Of course. All you have to do is just to log on to www.foodfair.gd with credit card in hand, and with an order of $100 or more, Food Fair Grand Anse will deliver up to 3 miles away. And you don't even have to worry about your information, you know. Their safety measures are excellent.
So hold on. You just order online and Food Fair will deliver to you?
Yep.
Oh, baby, better hurry up and order, man.
I already did. They should be here any minute now.
Enjoy easy online shopping anytime from your home or office from the Food Fair web store. Food Fair, where you can fill your baskets without emptying your pockets.
Hi
am Eddie Frederick, wishing you a restful weekend. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.